Last week, I pointed out something I want to spend another couple of minutes on. When Wolbe talks about our relationship with others, right? He describes it as widening circles of concern where the people we're closest to, we're supposed to be closest to, right? Like he talks about the shared concern of the Jewish people, and then our responsibility to everyone else, and then to what is it? No, they're the reyus between Jews, the responsibility to act in darchei shalom to other people, and having a sense of responsibility toward everything else. See, he's sort of describing, which is something we also find in Rav Shimon, he's describing widening circles of concern. And I found a number of other cultures that have this kind of ethic, where the ethic isn't, Yeshu's, do unto others, which doesn't distinguish between people. It's kind of like a global, love everybody kind of thing, and actually is okay, or even endorsing a person having a greater sense of responsibility and moral calling toward those closer to them. And so I found that people who read my book found the Socratics had this kind of ethics. Here's one I never would have found on my own. Mencius in China had this kind of ethics. There's a feminist theory of ethics called an ethic of care, where the idea is that what you're prizing ethically is relationship, and therefore the people that you relate to the most have the greatest moral calling. So I wanted to show you this Gemara because the Gemara there's a weird take on that Gemara that I think is interesting. So here's the Gemara. The Gemara was discussing the verse V'chaya chicha imach, and it was the middle of a machlokes, and then it asks Rabbi Yochanan, what does he do? Rabbi Yochanan, Hay v'chaya chicha imach my ovid lei. So what does he do with this verse? Right, the other side is using this as a proof text. What does Rabbi Yochanan do with it? Mibaile, he needs it like a Tanya. Now the brisa that he's learning the verse like, learning the pasuk like, is really what I wanted to show. Shnaim shoyu mahalchim b'derech. Two people are on a trip. Let's say in the middle of a desert. Ubiyad echad mehem kiton shalmayim. Jordy fell off and ended up back in the waiting room. Okay, and in the hand of one of them is a canteen of water. Im shosen shnehen. So hypothetically, we somehow or another know that if both of them were to drink, mesim, they would die. The im shosa echad mehem. But if only one of them were to drink, Magia Liyishuv, he'd reach human habitation. He'd reach settlement. Darish Ben Petura. So Ben Petura, who we never hear of before or again anywhere in Chazal, Darshans the pasuk. Darshans. Mutav yishtu shneim v'yamusu. It's better that both of them drink and die. Ba'al yira echad mehem. B'misaso shel chavero. and one should not see the death of his friend. Ad sheba Rabbi Akiva, until Rabbi Akiva came v'limed, and he taught the verse that brought up this conversation, "Chayechicha imach," and your brother shall live with you. Chayecha kodmin l'chaye chavercha. So your life comes before the life of your brother. How do we know this? Because it only tells you to keep him alive, imach, with you. So if you're not alive, then you don't have a responsibility. If you're not protecting your own life, you don't have a responsibility to protect his at your own expense. So that is Rabbi Akiva's ethics. Remember, there's the same Rabbi Akiva who says, if you have to l'reicha kamocha, zeh klal gadol b'Torah. Right? Mm-hmm. So the same one who says that loving your peer, your neighbor, your whatever reicha is as yourself is a central or the central principle of the Torah, is saying here that you're allowed to keep yourself alive at the expense of the other person dying. Now, the reason why I mentioned that this is the only time you hear of Ben Petura is because there's something very interesting about the name. Did I tell any of you this one? Mm-hmm. Okay, so in a lot of the world, particularly as Rome became Christian, there was a growing story told about Jesus, that Yeshu was born by Mary having relations with a Roman soldier who went by the nickname the Panther. You haven't heard this one, Moshe? Moshe, it's in Toldos Yeshu, but it was generally believed in the Babylonian Empire, in the Sassanid Empire, in the days that the Gemara was collated, edited, whatever the right term is. So Ben Petura sounds suspiciously close to Ben Pantura, except the nun fell out. And this would be Christian ethics, that it's better that both people die, mm-hmm. even though the other person's going to die no matter what which decision you take. And that this is actually, Rabbi, a contrast between Christian ethics and Jewish ethics. That Rabbi Akiva is saying that in a Jewish ethical system, the Aniyeh Ircha Kodmin, the poor people of your own city get your money first. You're supposed to recognize the people that you have a greater connection to, even when it comes to chesed, ahead of strangers. So the one way of reading this Gemara is that it's not an actual machlokes, it is Rabbi Akiva versus Christianity.
Very interesting.
Which I thought was kind of clever. It's the kind of thing that I'm suspicious of because it has so much truthiness. You wonder if you're just buying into it, even though it doesn't actually have truth. You know what I mean? It's the kind of theory you'd love to be true because it's just so cute. But whether or not it is true is a little harder to determine.
You have to go back to the manuscripts and see if anyone has a recording of another text variant that we are.
Right. But that's the idea that I wanted to pause at, is that systems of ethics like an ethic of care, because they start by working on relationship, on haYedidus, actually all end up or repeatedly end up with a philosophy that, what am I trying to say? They repeatedly end up with an ethical system where Aniyeh Ircha Kodmin, those who are closer to you come first. Mm-hmm. I just thought it was interesting to see in that's where Wolbe ends up. He starts out with this idea of Olam haYedidus, and ends up, describing it as an ethic of, you have the greatest responsibility with other Jews, and then you have a responsibility to other people. You have a responsibility to other living things and the planet, etc. In lesser gradations. Okay, whether or not you liked it is whatever.
I'm very interested if you could find. I don't have the fancy Baba Metzia with the notes. I didn't get up to that volume, so I can't check for you. But interesting.
On the page over at Sefaria for anybody else who wants to see it. It's right there.
Right where?
Sure.
I'll put it in the chat.
Oh, okay. I'm so used to.
I'll put in the Watts as well if you wish.
Yeah. I'm opening on the shared. Yeah. It's the same text.
Yep.
I just like. I like seeing a Gemara on a standard Gemara page so that when I have to find it again, I know what it looks like.
Of course.
It's just easier looking for things if you have like a vague mental image. I mean, there are Shabbos afternoons where I flip through a Gemara because I knew it was somewhere around 2/3 of the way through the Masechta, 3/4 of the way down on the third wide line. And I can't actually find it, but I narrowed it down like enough that I'm looking at 20 at the same spot in 20 different pages. No, it can't be that page. It's totally the wrong shape, like that kind of thing. So anyway, so that's why I had pulled up Hebrew books so they could see the text in the normal layout. Anyway, I'm going to jump back a paragraph because Rav Wolbe kind of restarts the conversation after his detour. Right, he spent a little time talking about Musar, about how most of learning is halacha, and then there was an awakening first in haYedidus, and then in Musar, and some points in common, and he didn't really discuss too many points of difference, but like the idea that haYedidus has a Rebbe and Musar has a mashgiach ruchni, and the idea that the mashgiach ruchni, what's it called? Madrich Talmidav, he would guide his students al yedei sichos musarios through Musar shmuzin. Chugei avodah mitzumtzamim, specific exercises, well-defined exercises. Mitzumtzam is kind of constricted, like narrowly defined. So it's like a SMART goal exercise, they'd say in business nowadays. Something measurable. V'kasher haduk ishi im talmidim, and v'kesher haduk ishi im talmidim, and a close personal connection with the students. That's where that's actually not where I'm restarting, but I'm restarting here. Nisinu l'tayer b'kitzur nimrat et Olam haYedidus shel Yadus. So we tried to, in brief illustrations, describe the Olam haYedidus of Judaism. L'maaseh kol kila sheYehudim miyasadim. In practice, every community that Jews establish, mostos azarashala, on its help institutions, charitable institutions, I think we'd say, but azara, charities got interesting connotations. Not really sure how Jewish they are, frankly. Shalaval hargashas ha'achrayus ha'hadadit shel chavrei hakehila, and the feeling of responsibility, communal responsibility of the members of the community. Mahavat olam shel yedidus, the Zeir Anpin. Remember that Zeir Anpin is we decide microcosm. Hare lefanenu, I actually think, by the way, Olam haYedidus, he really is saying as brought into this world. And there is a Kabbalistic aspect to it, but whatever. Hare lefanenu signon chayim mushlam. It's a way of life, a complete way of life, mevusas al mitzvos haTorah, that is based upon the mitzvos of the Torah. Misuchal al yidei ha'halacha v'tarat halev v'hergesh. Right? It's embodied by the halacha, the Torah, the heart, and feeling. Nitan lomar. So even this is why I think he was just talking about how even though there was halacha, there was always a side interest in hargasha and feeling. Nitan lomar ki hargasha b'sisit shel hachai ba'olam haTorah, the fundamental feeling, emotion of somebody who lives in the world of Torah, he bitachon, this is trust, generally connoting trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as you'll see from his psukim. Hinei kel Yeshua siyev tachvlo of chad. Right, here is the God who saves me. I will have bitachon v'lo avchad, and I will not be in fear. Oh, or another example, LeDavid Hashem ori v'yishi, right? Hashem is my light and my salvation. Mimi iro, who will I fear? Hashem is chayai, Hashem is the strength of my life. Mimi avchad, from who will cause me to panic? Zui ruach haminasheves b'chol kitvei hakodesh. This is the spirit that flows through all of the sacred writings. Bayis haYehudi banui ba'olam haYedidus shel Torah, and the Jewish home is built on the Olam haYedidus of the Torah. So far, so good.
Mm-hmm.
Notice he talks here about bitachon banishing fear. Or bitachon is the central feeling of Jewish life. Bitachon banishes fear. Where's his mention of Yedidus in that paragraph?
Mm.
Right, he starts the paragraph by saying, I'm going to describe Olam haYedidus. You know that there's no Olam haYedidus. You see it in the structure of a Jewish community, right? And that Jewish community is founded on halacha, right? Agadata and emotion. And the central emotion is bitachon. And what happened to Yedidus now?
Mm-hmm.
I think that without the bitachon, you're not going to have the Yedidus, because bitachon allows you to look beyond yourself, allows you to be, allows you to say, I could worry about my other person. I don't have to be that Gemara Bava Metzia Chayacha Kaidmim, because I'm okay. I'll be okay, right? I'm not walking in the desert with only one jug of water. So the Yedidus is an offshoot of the bitachon.
I think it's also a cause.
Yedidus is a cause of bitachon, or bitachon is a cause of Yedidus?
I think both. In other words, the fact that I can feel Yedidus beinadam lamakom is my source of bitachon, which then gives me the room to feel Yedidus toward others.
Okay.
But we'll see where he goes. Barur, ki ha'olam hakar, hamuvta b'melchemes hachayim hachamri mi'ikaro. The cold world. It's clear that the cold world that is mutba, that is illustrate is the wrong word. Whatever. That is, we'll use illustrated in the war of life, the physical war of life from its beginning. Ukarka porel pachad. It's soil that's ripe for fear. Ein ze mikra. It's not a coincidence. Ki hapachad hu nosei mitshutaf l'filosofia v'psychologia hamordenit. Fear is the central support for the philosophy and psychology, modern philosophy and psychology of Martin Heidegger. Philosophia. I read it wrong. It's no coincidence that this is the central theme in philosophy, in modern philosophy. And the modern philosophy. No. I think I was putting the period at the beginning of the sentence.
Oh, that's what you're saying.
The psychologist, the psychologist, the modern psychologist Martin Heidegger, Toane, but it could go either way. I mean, the first time I was reading it, it was one way, but then I remembered I prepared it thinking it was the other way. That was the reason why I reread the line. But either way, modern philosophy and partly also modern psychology, as Martin Heidegger argues, ki apachad hi hisrachata habasisim shel ha'olam ha'adam ba'olam.
I think maybe anxiety is a better translation than fear here.
Well, usually for pachad I use panic, so they freeze up fear for yira. But I'll go with anxiety. I never learned Sinun Sight, which is being and time. So I cannot tell you. I mean, I don't know Heidegger from a hole in the wall. I'm exaggerating a little, but I'd recognize this as a human being. This is a hole in the wall. But I can't get much beyond that. Ein tzarich lavtzia al hamakom harachav shapachad tofes psychology and in psychology and psychoanalysis and psychiatry. Right? We don't have to waste a lot of space telling you how big anxiety is, how big of an issue, how much space anxiety takes up in psychoanalysis and psychiatry. Ulaya pachad hu hastigma shel dorenu. Maybe anxiety is the big stigma of our times. Garmu lekach iya bitachon kalkali. This has caused a general lack of bitachon, communal lack of bitachon. I said general. B'vadai gam pituach haneshech hanucleari.
Nuclear family?
No. I think this is you're younger than
power? Atomic power, atomic
the fear of the whole Cold War fear of atomic war.
Neshek nucleari.
Neshek is a weapon, right?
So bitachon kalkali means the food insecurity.
Oh, okay. Economic insecurity, maybe. Kalkala is economics.
Yeah.
Economic insecurity and the reason for the arms race, for the nuclear arms race. Aval ein safek ki gam avdan hamuna be'elokim. There is no doubt that also the loss of faith in God, hu gorim chazak lihit pashtus hapachad. It's a major cause of the spread of anxiety. Adam hanolad v'gadal b'toch olam haYedidus, with someone who grows up, someone who's born and grows up in the world of Yedidus, Yodea umargish, he knows and he feels, ki hatchusha existential, the existentialist, the ha'ikarit, the fundamental existentialist theme, eina pachad eladavka Yedidut, is not fear but Yedidus. K'muvan, Ein hasvarim umerim lagabe pachadim. The thinkers don't say about those with anxiety. Shenigmaru al yedei trauma. Biankut, some childhood trauma, ukdom, or something like this. Yankut during nursing ages. Ella bipachadim insects. Only existential fears. I could do it in English much better than Hebrew. Kagon hargashas choser tochen b'chayim, like a lack of substance, a lack of meaning in one's life.
First world problems.
No, I think he's saying that this is inherent to the human condition, not.
No, I'm just saying that if person is worried about every day what the other things he's talking about, that he's going to be killed in a nuclear weapon or who doesn't have food to put on the table, then people like that aren't focusing, I think, in general, on the lack of meaning in life. They're too busy struggling, right, with existing. That's what I meant.
Yeah, but is that what he's saying, or is he saying that in practice that is what people are feeling all this anxiety about?
Well, he's saying that we're not talking about if there's a quote unquote legitimate reason, or not even a legitimate reason. If there's you could draw a line from cause A to result B, from the cause of the anxiety to the manifestation of the anxiety. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about people who don't have an apparent reason for their anxiety.
Okay, no, I understood the first parenthetic comment differently. And that's very amorim lagabe pachadim, right? They're not giving the reasons by people with anxiety. Trauma beyond kodama. Those things don't cause trauma, I think he's saying. Somebody who was traumatized as a child doesn't spend his life in anxiety. That's the way I read him. Anxiety is caused by not having meaning in your life, not having purpose, not having direction, and things that actually should cause fear are not the things that are causing pachad, anxiety.
I don't know. Those PTSD things that they wind up.
Okay. You don't know that's what he's saying, or you don't agree.
I don't know.
I don't think that's what he's saying, but you don't agree with the point.
I don't know. All I'm saying is that I've seen things, that he wouldn't have known in the '60s, but there have been.
Okay. So you see that that's what he's saying, but you think he's mistaken.
It might be. I don't know. It's just that there's the trauma as a child can cause effects in the brain that would then lead to depression and anxiety as an adult. But there's no way to know that really for sure because it's in the brain and we can't really see it without cutting the head open.
No, functional MRI. Yeah, you should talk to my son. He's done a lot of stuff with knowing what's going on inside the brain without killing the patient.
Mm-hmm.
Although mostly he kills the rats, but when he does stuff with humans, he doesn't kill the patient. Mm-hmm. Anyway, but yeah, that was the way I read him. Not that today we're stuck in first world problems, but that anxiety is always or almost always caused by these empty life issues and not by I mean, you're not convinced, Mashiuda, no?
I'm not sure. I think it comes down to how you read the word Hesperim, like what he's talking about. I'm not sure. I'm not sure we're really disagreeing in practice. Just maybe in how to translate.
No, I don't think we're disagreeing in practice either. Speaking as somebody who actually has PTSD, so I'm not. I would say there are definitely exceptions to what he's saying either way, like John did, but I think he's saying that the primary source, whether he's saying the only source or whatever, I think we could agree that the primary source of anxiety in today's lives is something that Viktor Frankl would write at length about.
Yeah. It's like depression. There's psychological versus chemical. And you don't know. You can't really know without like trying things out and saying, "Oh well, medicine works. Then it must be chemical, or it doesn't work. Then it might be something. We should try more talk therapy."
But the sentence I think is interesting is the one before the he has two parenthetic remarks at the end of the paragraph. Remember, they're both parenthetic. The last real sentence at the end of the paragraph, Olam hanolad v'gadol b'toch olam haYedidus, which is how he's defining the world of Torah, right? So somebody who grows up, who's born and grows up in the world of Yedidut, of affection, Yodeu umargish get chusha, the existential feel, right. Yeah, I'm better just reading the English. The fundamental existential, right? Eina pachad el davke yedidus. So we were asking what the relationship is between yedidus and pachad. I hear him as saying pachad's what happens when there's no yedidus in your life. And that's why he was relating it to the person whose life is, he has, ennui or existential angst or one of these anxiety causing lack of meaning problems. Which colored how I also read the parenthetics, because I'm figuring the parenthetics are building on a sentence that says that somebody who's living in the world of Yedidus is not going to be overwhelmed with pachad. He sees them as not opposites, but as if you don't fill your emotional makeup with one, you're going to end up with the other. And that's why when we relearned the previous paragraph, I was going, why does he jump from Olam haYedidus to Hine kel yishosef tachvelo evchad? Okay, new topic. Anybody have anything on that topic?
Well, I missed last week, so I don't even know what Olam haYedidus means to him. I mean, it sounds like the world of intimacy, but I don't know what that means.
Right. So he quotes a Gemara. I mean, whatever. I'll point you. I actually translated this essay, so I could point. If you want to just run through and catch up, I could point you to. It's sitting on Gil's webzine or blog or whatever you call Torah musings.
Okay.
But he builds this idea that everything HaKadosh Baruch Hu created has a purpose. He gives an example of David HaMelech saying, why is there insanity in this world? Everything in the world has a purpose, and therefore it has value, and you should treasure it. And therefore, you should be feeling a connection with everything, starting between the Jewish people and God, to other Jews, to, like I said at the beginning of this, what's it called? Other Jews, other people, and, the entire world. And this is actually what he's telling these Chilonim, if you recall. So these Chilonim in 1967 who approached him, what is Judaism? He's telling them that Judaism is the art of Torah, as Haredim see it, is the art of building a world of Yedidus. Right? Yedidus between person and person, between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Jews, and so on.
Interesting.
Right. That was where he went last week. Again, I would rather than relying on my thumbnail, I'd recommend you either catch up to the 3 stars sometime after tonight, or just read the English up to the equivalent, up to where it starts getting familiar.
Interesting. I personally, even though I must say that, to be honest, some of what brought me initially into Torah Judaism was Yirat HaOnesh. The eventual life of meaning it gives, or ultimately
I think superior to the existential fear of nothingness I had before getting into Torah Judaism. At least every moment can be meaningful, at least. I mean, certainly in a Torah perspective.
Mm-hmm. Right. But again, he's not only saying that there's a meaning, he's telling you this meaning is about building haYedidus. Right? He's defining the world of Torah as the world of haYedidus. Right? Which is, I mean, like relationshipful meaning, as I ended up beyond meaningful relationships, relationshipful meaning, which sounded a lot better, I gotta tell you, 3 months ago than it sounds to me right now. But that is where I was going with this. Olam haYedidus is exactly that. He's saying that in Yiddishkeit, you find your meaning in relationship. And this relationship is not only interpersonal. In fact, it starts with your relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Olam haYedidus.
I mean, like, how you start a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I mean, a Yedid. I mean, granted, this is from first principles, but I mean, to get beyond the level of respecting Hashem because of what He can do to you. I mean, to actually move to some sort of relationship is a big gap.
Right. I was thinking, I have not read the book, but it would be, I would attempt to revisit Heschel, God in Search of Man, and so forth.
Well, he phrases it, I think, in terms of Hine Kel Yeshua Siav Taflo of Chad, the David Hashem Oriv Yishi. Right? Not he talks about building a relationship in terms of what Hashem can do for me, not to me. Right? Which gets back to where Moshe Yehuda and I were talking about, whether, I was saying that a feeling of haYedidus with HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives you a reason for bitachon, which gives you room to start worrying about other people because you're not obsessed with survival instincts.
I hear that. After Balot Hashlach and Korach, though, it's it's trying to think of a relationship. When you think of the same being who did all the things in Balot Hashlach and Korach, granted in response to hate, the idea of forming a relationship can be a little bit fearful.
I don't know. I hear those stories in the reverse. I hear those stories as stories of what happens when you walk out on the relationship.
Yeah, that's true. Rav Lopiansky said that I think if the Cheda Ego was like abuse or adultery, in a sense, the Cheda Meraglim was indifference, neglect, which is in some ways even worse. The cold indifference, neglect that can kill a relationship or a person more clearly even than abuse or adultery.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
I'm also thinking about the dangers of instrumentalizing a relationship. When these folks make the golden calf, in a way, it's for it to get something out of it, and it's something one has to be very careful in a relationship, either with the divine or with other people. Just be careful. Yes, you do have your own self-interest, but you need to be very careful not to make that the basis of your relationship with the other person or God.
So you remind me, the Ramchal distinguishes between Yiras HaChet and Yiras HaOnesh. He actually says that default when we speak of Yira, we're talking about Yiras HaChet, not Yiras HaRomamos. So to define those terms, Yiras HaRomamos is awe for, like the grandeur of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yiras HaOnesh is fear of getting a pitch. Yiras HaChet is fear of sinning because it's wrong, not because of the outcome. So the way I would explain it with mashal, in a healthy marriage, a guy does what his wife wants. Sorry, and then let's start with the easy one. In an unhealthy marriage, a guy does what his wife wants because of fear of repercussions. Right? I don't want her upset. She's going to do X, Y, and Z, withhold favors, however you want to phrase it, or whatever her favorite punishment is. And that is Yiras HaOnesh. Yiras HaChet is there's a healthy relationship between husband and wife. The wife doesn't want something done. The husband doesn't want to do it because the love for his wife means he doesn't want, if she doesn't want it done, he doesn't want it to happen either. So it's the chet itself that he's afraid of, not the consequences of the chet.
Yeah, to reach that level is admirable. I mean, people, if people ask themselves, what if Hashem personally assured you, I won't, give you onesh for X, Y, Z, what would one do from the core of one's being at that point? It's these are things I meditate on. How much is onesh? How much is you doing it for its own sake? Like, being polite to people simply because Elam Elohim.
Right. The Rambam famously believes that one leads to the other, right? You teach a kid by rewarding him, and eventually the kid wants to do it without the reward because the right values were inculcated along the way. Right? I mean, that's right. He kind of holds Yiras. I mean, the Ramchal also writes about that. Yiras HaChet is a terrible thing, except for the fact that in the meantime you're not sinning. So it has its role, like it's not the ideal, but it works. But in any case, my point was that kind of fear of doing the wrong thing is actually an expression of love. It's not Ava versus Yira. If you follow the Ramchal, that Yiras HaChet is that Yira by default refers to Yiras HaChet, then it's coming from an Avas Hashem. It's not a tension with Avas Hashem, which is a very interesting, non-intuitive way of looking at it, I think. It's definitely not the way it's normally talked about. But in the meantime, he's right now just trying to establish a case that is a valid definition of Yiddishkeit. The how-to is not really where he's going with this, right? He's just trying to build a case that Yiddishkeit is all about bitachon. Bitachon comes, bitachon is the opposite of pachad, anxiety. Anxiety comes from not having meaning, and meaning comes from not living in a world of relationships, of haYedidus. That's the picture he's drawing for us. Now, how to get there, that's an interesting question, but we're not going to find it in this text. I mean, for that kind of thing, we'd actually have to go to like Ali Shur second volume, where he is playing the role of mashgiach and coming up with those very specific exercises. And, we could do a series on bitachon and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. John and I have tried some of those vadim together. Generally, what I find with a vad is while you're very active, which for different people lasts for about 6 months to 3 years. Things stick. The problem is that of what you are doing when you're active, only a single-digit percentage ends up sticking in the long term. Would you agree, Moshe Yehuda?
I'm multitasking and I missed that. I apologize.
I was talking about the success of Avad.
I did hear that part of the conversation. We did the VAD, and
Yeah. I would say it's like whittling.
It's hard work. You have to be really motivated, because if you just learn the stuff and then come back next week and you didn't do any practice in it, you don't really get anywhere.
Right, but I was saying also that like a year later, right, only about 5% actually sticks. So you put in all that work, and you could get a little frustrated with how little change there was.
That doesn't bother me. I'll tell you why. I actually just saw this great meme yesterday. It said if you take 1 to the 365th, you get 1, right?
Yes.
But if you take 1.01 to the 365th, you get whatever that comes out to. Right?
I hear.
Isn't that a nice concept?
Compounding interest.
Exactly.
Working to your advantage instead of to the credit card company.
Exactly. I think that's a very powerful point.
Yeah, so Tita's solution was simply never stop.
Mhm.
Right. I'm just saying, though, that the kind of work that Ariel is asking about is hard. It's real. Most of the people in this meeting have tried it or are trying it, and you got to learn, even after all that hard and real, not to be frustrated with how little sticks in the long term. And all that said, that is actually like life's work, and regardless of how frustrating and how much work it takes to accomplish so little, you're stuck doing it anyway. That was going to be my answer. My answer was, yeah, it's tough, it's hard, it's frustrating, and yet you're stuck. You got to do it, because that's the only way you're going to get from where we are to an Olam haYedidus. I mean, there's plenty of anxiety in the observant world. Despite his portrayal of the observant world as being Olam haYedidus, and Yedidus drives out pachad.
Oh, he's about to talk about the downsides, or the potential
opposition.
Hmm?
He's about to talk about the opposition.
Right. And he brings a little bit of realism into his discussion.
Yeah, I don't know if everybody saw Geordie's quote. Geordie quotes Winston Churchill: "Success is all about going from failure to failure without losing enthusiasm."
That's a good one. I like that.
Yeah, that's why I read it out loud. Rabbi Sachs liked it also. Okay, Olam haYedidus. Eino Olam ideali. It's not some ideal or idyllic. I think here he means idyllic world. Bali kochos nigdiyim, with no oppositional forces. Kochot shel zarus, feelings of alienation and estrangement. Omdim negdo, stand against him. Me'aimim tamid lifgoabo af laharso. So they're always busy trying to attack him, to hit him, destroy him. Olam haYedidus hu olam achid. It's a unifying world. It's what's the word I'm looking for yachid? Achid. Achdus. It's a world of unity. Habonui al kirva gedola, that is built upon a great closeness. Bein adam leboro, between a person and its creator. Bein adam lechavero. V'yesh koch ba'adam she'eino rotzeh b'kirva zos. But there's a force in a person that doesn't want this closeness. Hitnachrus, self-alienation. Mishateches shebelev.
Shalev.
Oh, mitpad. Teches, shalev acharei shalev. Shlav acharei shlav is the way I think I read it the first time. Adav dam kol zika el hazoles. right? So it's an alienation that diminishes level by level until you lose all Zika, all connection. No, Zika's to value somebody.
Yeah, connection.
Zika.
A person becomes like by you. We're just finishing Yavamas, right?
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, you are.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
Yavamas took me to town.
Okay.
Hopefully, I'll do better with Subis. But I think he's saying that by pushing back and not wanting to have relationships, and both between man and man and man and God, then eventually you become totally alienated from society.
Until the worst of all the midos, achzarius. So achzarius means what? Cruelty, callousness. But notice he doesn't spell it achzarius as a word. Aleph Chav Zav. He hyphenates it. Achzarius, only alienation.
So it means like cruelty.
Right, but he's defining cruelty as a feeling of pure alienation.
That's very, very interesting. It's, you know what it is? It's sociopathic.
Wordplay.
No, it is.
Yeah.
But that's what it's sociopathic. It's these school shooters and the person from Chicago yesterday.
Right.
No connection to society. And from the little I read, it does seem to be the case in most of these cases. Right? The guy in Buffalo was the same way.
Right. Although I don't know I think to bring it a little more to what's it called? This desire to stand alone and stand off applies to people a little more toward the middle of the bell curve as well. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just trying not to focus on.
Look at his next line of definition.
Achzarius kolomar zaris muchletes. Achzer sameach la'ayed chavero. Nehene mitzaro. Yeah, so this could be talking about the shooter, and it does talk about the shooter, but I Badavka want to make it more about us. In other words, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just trying to take a less extreme case because it's more relatable. So let's talk about the person who just feels Schadenfreude, right? His competitor at work, or this guy who got all the credit at work, something goes bad for them, and then mitzaro also. That's also achzarius, right? It doesn't have to be the achzarius of a mass shooter to be achzarius. I mean, that was sort of. I wasn't disagreeing with you. I just wanted to get away from cases that are so extreme that it reduces the topic to not talking about me.
Point taken.
But you're not wrong. I mean, I'm not like saying that he isn't referring to that, especially since this is in contrast to psychiatry. Hashlav hacharon shel hisnachrut of self-alienation, the last level of self-alienation, zuhu. I think that's grammatically backwards. It would either be zehu or zuhi. Sha'adam niyazar la'atzmo v'achzari la'atzmo. So a person is alienated from himself and cruel to himself.
Interesting.
Rei barichos Wolbe shesh la'asar Yishalayim shen mamar Olam haYedidus. Don't worry, we will look at it. Because that is that's the scanned text after this one. We're going to be skipping the over, whatever. We'll skip the first few paragraphs because it's a shortened version of what we're looking at now, but that is the next that's the next text we're going to. The Talmud, Anumotziim, so we see in the Gemara, Hamakara begada of b'chamaso, somebody who tears their clothing in their anger. B'mishaber kela b'chamaso, or throws that, the coffee cup, shatters it against the wall. Or wastes his money in his anger. Should look at that person like they're idolatrous. Because that's the way the Yetzer Hara does its job. Hayom Omer Lo Esekach. First day it tells Asekach. First day the Yetzer Hara tells you, go do this. Lamachar Malo Asekach, and the next day do that. Ad Shomer Lo Avoda Vodazar V'Holech V'Oved. Until you're so used to obeying whatever it tells you that it tells you to worship Avodah Zarah, and you go and you do it. Amar Avavin, my Kara'a. What is its pasuk, which he translates Eifo Ze Katuv B'Tanach. Where is it written in Tanakh? Lo Yeh Lecha El Zar, Lo Tishtachaveh El Nechar. You shouldn't have in you an El Zar, a foreign god, and you shouldn't bow down to a foreign deity. It's interesting. I hadn't realized El Zar when he's talking about Zariyut. It's interesting that's the Padavka, the way the pasuk describes the God which is within you. Ezehu El Zar Shebegufo Shel Adam. Who is the alien God that is in a person's body? Havayomer Zeh Yetzer Hara.
This is now we know why he split Achzar into two words.
Well, he would split Achzar into two words for the simple reason that it's the opposite of Yedidus.
Okay.
Zarius and Yedidus are opposites.
Yeah, but the wordplay works.
Yeah, I mean, right. Text Zeh. Another hard Hebrew word there. Magdir es hara koach shel zarus. This text delineates evil as a force of alienation. So by calling the Yetzer Hara an El Zar, it's telling you that the Yetzer Hara, and says the El Zar is the Yetzer Hara, it's telling you the Yetzer Hara is a force for zarus, for alienation. Which fits if the Torah is a force for Yedidus. A Talmud Mavua Mitayer Khan, the Gemara is explaining here, Talich Shel Nachrut, the way of self-alienation, of alienating oneself, or making oneself alienated to other things. Hamaschil v'hisnachrut adam latzmo yidei kas, which starts with a person being alienated to himself through anger. And from there, alienated from God, avodah zarah. Lo al chinam nikreis alilus b'shem zeh. It's not for nothing that this God is called by this name, but to tell you that the central theme of the Yetzer Hara, the foreign God, is the power of zarut, of alienation. This is I thought this was a powerful punch. First of all, it explains why kol hakohe is kilu oved avodah zarah. Because anger, by self-alienating, right, is what brings one to listen to the Yetzer Hara instead of to God.
It separates them from God.
Misham hu magia litnachrut lelokim. So anger alienates somebody from themselves, and that reaches that process brings you to alienation from God. Ma'u mahalech hitnachrut hazot. What is the path of this alienation? Alienation can't be entirely evil, he says, because it wouldn't be in the soul. There's nothing in the soul that's only evil, that has no positive use. It's purely evil. Every force or potential or ability has a place in the world of Yedidus. Gam gaiva v'ra'a v'ka'as, even egotism and anger, nichutzim lefa'amim, kasher mishtamshim kol ha'koach b'mkomo bizmano tovhu. Right? Egotism and anger are proper at times when they're used when each force is when you use each potential, each ability, tovhu, in its proper time, place and time, it is good.
Isn't that like the
I don't know if it's like the Rambam.
I mean, because
The Rambam is saying there's a middle.
But
right.
The Rambam talks about as far as gaiva, right? He says you got to go all the way to the other end, right?
Right. No, but the Rambam is kind of complicated because in the beginning he talks about a middle path. The end of the first parak he talks about every midah has its place, and when we say middle path, we mean using both. And then in Parak Beis, he talks about there are midos that you shouldn't have at all, including, he says anova you should have extreme, right? But anova is one of the examples that should be in the middle in the beginning. The Mefarshim have a field day with this. Did the Rambam describe two different ideals? So he starts out discussing the Chacham, and then in the second parak, he's discussing the Chassid and their different ideals. But what exactly is going on with the Rambam is not something that I could just off the cuff answer.
Okay, so I meant it as a throwaway. I think we can go on. Okay,
fine. No, but what I do find interesting in this is that every force has a proper. Okay, I'll give you a mashal that I think describes Rav Wolbe's view of midos, as opposed to like a middle mixture. Picture an orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
Orchestra has a conductor. So in the back, because they're loud, you have the timpanis, right? Closer up front, maybe you have the first, the second string, and so on. It's a conductor's job to know when you play the timpanis and when you play the strings, and over here, let's bring in some of the brass, and there's the woodwinds, and he's coordinating everything. And that's the job of the seichel, at least. At times he's feeling kind of tells-ish. It's kind of kelmish. But then what happens is Kaz comes in, steals the baton, and things go totally awry.
Hear that?
So he sort of sees each thing has a place and a time. It's not like there's a middle, and that it's like knowing the right place and the right time for each midah.
Right, because you do find
how he sees mastery.
Right.
Right, and yet he's also supposed to be a what's it called?
Like the Bali Musar.
Mavir al Midosov.
Right, which Bali Musar said that he had one thing in one packet that said Nechia for Veifer, and the other one that said, I'm paraphrasing, I don't remember. The other one said the Shvili Nivra Ilam, something like that, right?
Right. So if you're Hasidish, that is Rav Elazar's brother, Rav Simcha bonim.
Okay. If you're lit
And
fish.
if you're lit fish, it's the Alter Slabodka.
I was
And
listening.
the Alter Slabodka version goes further and says that every person lives in two worlds. The world that you share with other people only contains the things you actually do. And therefore, in that world, the world that is subjective, that is all about your thoughts and how you see the world, includes everything you plan to do. And therefore, in that world truly was Bishvili Nivra, because that's a personal, customized world just for you. And so that's how he answers both quotes.
Interesting. I was listening to
We say it every morning in davening anyway.
Both?
What? Well, more or less that message, the Olam, haYedidus, and so on and so forth. Consider. Yeah. I mean, it says that on the other hand, Hashem has chosen us and given us all this stuff and so on. Who the heck is it? It's got to be before there in this one. Not for our righteousness. We have to put, that we pray our tachlis before you, but because what are we? What are our lives? What are what is our chesed? What is our righteousness? And the person is just that you made all these covenants with us, and therefore we have to thank you and praise you and so on.
I hear the relatedness. I don't think it's exactly the same theme, though.
It's not exactly the same, but it's
okay. So, right, we call it kochos hanimtzeim b'nefesh nechutzim. Ulam kedei livnos olam haYedidus tzricha liyos koordinatzia shel kol kochos yachad shiavdu kulam toch shituf pa'ula chalukat tzodekes shel tafkidehem.
Which is what you were saying at the orchestra.
Right. They all need to be coordinated. There needs to be coordination of all these forces together. Shiavdu kulam. They each should operate toch shituf pa'ula through a partnership, a coordination. Well, coordination he already wrote in English. So through a partnership of action, right, and a proper division of their jobs. The conductor is the seichel. That is the force that is. I mean, conductor is my term, but that is the force that rules over all the forces of the nefesh in their proper places. Asher al kain hu ikar koach haYedidus sheba adam, hu ikar koach sheba adam, beli shlitas haseichel lo olam shel Yedidus. Therefore, the seichel is the central force of Yedidus that is in a person. Without the rule of the seichel, there is no world of Yedidus. Kasher kolach mekochos hanefesh horeg. Choreg. Mitzchumaso, when it leaps out of its limits. V'doresh sipuk mufraz, or afilu shlita muchletes. I guess this is where I got the mental image of anger stealing the baton. But the truth is, I got to admit, when I was saying it, I was thinking of anger in particular. Koach zeh misnaker L'kochos acherim. There's a word I'm looking for. Misnaker. I could just say uproots, but really I want to say it.
Agonizes.
I was going to say cuts the tendons.
Hamstrings.
Hamstrings. That's where I was going. Like Minnaker to Traver.
Right.
That was where I thought that this was going. Cuts the hamstrings. The other abilities in the soul. Umismarade, right, and rebels neged aseichel against the intellect. Kan maschila zarus. That is when alienation begins. B'koach hazeh hofech lios ra, and then the force becomes evil. So the difference between a good midah and a bad midah is whether it listens to the seichel about when is the right time to be triggered, or it doesn't listen to the seichel and tries to take over. So in that sense, it is a very or a little, depending upon where in the Rambam you're looking, Rambam-esque. And that he's saying that, you have to have the right proportion, and as soon as the midah takes over and exceeds the, tries to take over everything, then it's evil. But I happen to like this mashal, whatever. It speaks to me. I was going to say better, but I'll just say it speaks to me more. Talich zeh mitaer haTalmud. This way is described by the Gemara. Shetzitatnu le'el, that we summarized above. B'dugma shalakas, with the case of anger. B'makom acher mitaer haTalmud also talich shalit nachrut. It also discusses this path to alienation, binyan taiva, minis, when it comes to sexual attraction. Lashon Gemara mekasha elsma ladas. The Gemara is discussing somebody who intentionally tries to stimulate themselves, get an erection. Kan anu magiyim l'she'elas habechira chavshis. Now we get to the question of bechira, of free will. Hitbaer, it's explained or explanatory. Ki ein koach ra behechle pa'adam. Right? We just said that. There's nothing in a person that is inherently evil. Anu yicholim l'shtamesh b'kochoseinu livnos et olam haYedidus. We can use the kochos, our kochos, to build the Olam haYedidus toch coordination shall hakochos al yidei seichel, through the coordination of these various abilities by the intellect. Hashimush b'hafraza b'koach echad o hismardus l'seichel garmim laharisas olam haYedidus. Right, overuse of one ability or rebelling against the intellect cause the destruction of the world of Yedidus.
Essentially imbalance.
Yeah, that's why I thought that there are hints here of the Rambam's Midah Beinonis. But the truth is, balance does not need to be Midah Beinonis either. The introduction to the Orchos Chaim describes the correct mixture of midos as a recipe. So some midos are like spices. They're best used sparingly. Some midos are like the meat, where they should be like all over the place. And when you make a dish, you have to know like how much is appropriate of each. So it's also talking about a balance, but the way you mentally view the balance is more of a, it's not middles. It's, there actually is a midah that's better to have more of. Given the fact that you're comparing apples and oranges, I don't want to say that it's really at odds with the Rambam. Like, how do you say this is the same amount? Does a person have more anger or more, jealousy? Like, how do you
Point is well
how do you
taken.
put a number on two of them? Like say you got more of what, I mean, or
Can I say something incredible I heard last night?
okay, if it's relevant.
It's relevant. Rabbi Nachman Ballman speaking at when people request files, like old files from the good archives, we have to listen to them, which is very difficult because nobody has time, because not everything translated well 30, 40 years later. And we don't really want it to end up on Twitter. And, somebody is maybe going a little beyond what we're comfortable with today. So Rabbi Nachman Ballman, so I was listening to Rabbi Nachman Ballman, Toby Katz's father, and he was saying, he started off with a story. He said that there was a parash, and he was by Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan in Kavna, in the city, in the town. And Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan walks over to him and he says, this is Leisu Adarach. This is not the way we have accepted in Kal Yisrael over the years. This is not. You would sit there and wait for people to bring him food, and his clothing would get all threadbare until someone brought him clothing. He would sit and learn all day. So he says, Rabbi, let me explain to you why I do this. He says, because thousands of years ago, when my neshama was created, I looked at the world and I saw, got to be in the middle. So I pegged myself, there's all the way to the right, there's all the way to the left, I'm right here in the middle. Fine. 1,000 or 2,000 years later, I take a look to my left and I see the left has gone much further. Okay, so I have to go to the middle. So I move a couple of miles, I move a couple of miles to the left. Now I'm in the middle again. And I'm going to fast forward. He said all like 6 generations of that. He said, and finally, so he's all the way, the middle, the middle has kept on going. He's talking about centuries, and that's actually what the topic of the session was. The middle has gone all the way to the left. And one day he wakes up and he says, hey, I've been looking to the left all this time. Let me look at the right. He looks at the right and he sees, oh my goodness, how far away from the right he is. So he makes this big jump and he ends up being a parish in Kavna. Right? So I actually think it's quite relevant because where is the middle? Which I think what Rabbi Wolbe was trying to say. Right?
Yeah.
What are you looking at to decide what the middle is? That's really what it is. He brought a nitziv it was, who basically says that the left are the people who are not, I'm probably misquoting it, but you get the idea, are not successful in doing everything for the Rebbeinu Shalom. And the middle is the people who sometimes are successful and sometimes not. And the right are the people who always are close to God, right? And he says that's really the right, left, and center, right? So the center should be the people who are sometimes not so successful, right? And he was trying to say that you gotta pick the edges in the right spots. Jordy is saying you look at where you are. There's an argument to be made for that. There's also an argument to be made to be an extremist, which is what this gentleman was arguing to Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan Spector.
Yeah, and then it was kind of being quoted there to back.
I don't think that Rabbi Bowman said like the end of the story. So I don't think he said that the Kavna Rav said, "Oh, you're right," or "You're wrong." I don't think that wasn't his point.
Right, I got it. So this idea of how you view being in the middle, right? How much is equal sides, kas and what's the word I'm looking for? And menuchas hanefesh. I don't know. Just pick something. There's kas has a lot of opposites. So shimish ba'fraz b'koach echad or ismaris l'seichel garmim harisis olam haYedidus. So overuse of one koach or rebelling against the seichel altogether cause the destruction of the world of Yedidus. Breirazu, he b'yedei hadam im levchor b'Yedidus o b'hisnachrus. So free will, right? Person has the choice Do you want haYedidus or Alienation? Which, by the way, was a TV series in the early 21st century. Oh, maybe late 1990s.
1990.
Alienation.
Yes.
It was a science fiction series. Alienation. Okay. Achain, who? Yachal Livkar.
Park Slope, and there was a hair salon that had a sign on it that looked like Tankanese.
Okay. Achain, who Yachal Livkar. Therefore, right, a person could choose. The Talmud on the Motzim Dugma Kazu. In Gemara, we see an example like this. Hai man de b'ma'adim. So, a person born under the sign of Mars. Yegever Oshid Dama. He's going to be a spiller of blood. I umna, I ganva, I tabcha, I moala. I assume you all know this Gemara? Yes, no? So the person has a choice, right? Do you want to be a murderer, a thief, a butcher, or a moel? They're all under the sign of Mars and about shedding blood, but there's positive shedding blood and what's it called? He translates. Hanola, I hadn't realized. Hanola b'mazel madim. So somebody who is born under the sign of Mars, Yehei Adam Hashofech Damim. O Mekiz Dam, he could be a bloodletter, O Ganav, or a thief, O Shochet, a slaughterer, or O Mohel. Ein biyad Adam l'shanos es hatchuna basisis b'tziur zeh hanetiya l'shvichas damim. A person doesn't have the ability to change this basic inclination toward bloodshed. Aval gam b'tchuna zu hu yachol ishtamish letova. But you could also use it positively. B'keshed ha'efshariyut hi rechava, and the rainbow, the spread, the spectrum of possibilities is broad. Hu yachol liyos rofei shochet omofel or omohel. He could be a doctor, a shochet, or a mole. Rak haganav she'eno nirtal miretzach. Right, the ganav who is not shying away from murder, who im hamishtamesh b'tchunaso derech shel hitnakrut. So he's not now talking. I don't think he's actually saying that there are midos in a person you can't change. He is saying that. Okay. Thank you. I'll wrap up the. I'll come to the meeting late and finish the paragraph. He is saying that. I just don't think that's what he means overall, because we've seen his other material, right? He's not giving va'adim in menuchas hanefesh. If he thinks that the amount of irritation, your level of irritability was fixed. I think he's saying that in a given moment, right? Even if you can't work. If you can't work on the meter right now, you could at least work on how to use it. And I know that's not what he's saying. I'm just saying that I don't know how to make this work with everything else he's written if you don't take it that way. It's not what he's saying here. I think it's just what he believes overall. Right here, he's saying something a little bit harder to swallow, right? The bloodletting thing, that's built in. You're not going to change it. Now, use it positively, use it negatively. That's your free will. Harelanu dugma mitchuna kitzonit. We have an example from an extreme proclivity. V'chol zos, that's bloodshed. V'chol zos ein shum hachrech shadam yeh rasha al yada. There's no necessity that the person's going to end up evil because of it. Yesh la bechira leishtamesh la l'matros mo'ilos bioser l'mana shleimus. He still has the choice to use it in ways that greatly aid shleimus. Navi kan dugma historit Historit me Chazal. Let's take a historical example from Chazal. Binyan Zeh. Kiven Shirah Shmuel as David Admoni. When Shmuel saw that David was red, Nisyari Zeh Shofech. Nisyari was afraid Zeh Shofech Damim. That the redness he saw was that the guy was a killer. Esav, like Esav was also, he was a redhead. He was a killer. Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Am Yafei Nayim. Esav midas atzmo hu horeg. Esav decided on his own to be a killer. Aval zeh midas Sanhedrin hu horeg. But he looks to Sanhedrin. He's not killing because it's his natural inclination to kill. He's killing because Sanhedrin says that there's a war that needs fighting. Still, there are limits to free will. You can't change the fundamental inclination in a person. In the example we gave above, somebody who's born with an inclination toward killing, toward bloodshed, cannot uproot that netiya. To build the world of haYedidus or destroy it. So we still got to work out with the problem that's really bothering me. And I think we'll revisit this paragraph because I kind of rushed. How do we understand that he's saying that you can't change a netiya if he has all this work, all these, an entire book of trying to change netiyos or midos? You have a thought?
Yeah. You don't know what your netiyos are, right? You don't know whether you're born in Madam, so to speak. I know you can look at astrological things, but let's just extrapolate. You don't know whether you, Micha Berger, have a proclivity towards bloodshed or not. And therefore, if you don't, you have to work on everything, just make yourself better. Because if you do have such a proclivity, you have to direct it to the right place. And if you don't, you have other things to work on.
As somebody with a temper, right? I do think it's possible for me to be more in control of my temper than I am. Not just to use my temper positively or negatively.
I don't know that the Tchuna Habasisas is temper, right? I don't know that that's how do you know that that's not something that was because of the way you were brought up?
Well, you don't, but it could be
that's what I'm saying. You don't know.
Right.
You don't know.
But it could be brain wiring. It could be endocrine system. It could be and wait, no. Which is the modern equivalent to saying born under the sign of.
The smarter you are, the more possibilities you can have on.
Right. Right. So I was trying to draw a line between choices you can make now and the hard work that takes decades of choices to make a dent.
Mm-hmm.
So that when he talks about you can't change, he's saying, with decades of work, you can whittle away at it versus it's easier to make the decision that, I'm going to be a shochet instead of a murderer. That is well within free will. Deciding to be less bloodsheddy, whatever, that would be in English, right? It's possible, but it's not the same kind of free will decision, like you always have on questions on Losach mode. How can you choose not to be jealous or want something somebody else has? It's a feeling. How much free will do I have?
There's a different formulation that Chazal used that I was a little surprised he hasn't quoted yet, which is a kol b'dei shemayim chutz miras shemayim, right? So yes. What does that mean? That means all you have to work on is yiras shemayim? Then no, it means that the yiras shemayim is what defines and is forms better, but forms everything else. right?
Um,
So the Yireh Shamayim is the Bechira that he's talking about over here, right? If you're Yireh Shamayim, that's the exact opposite of Histakros. You're coming close to Hashem, coming close to others, and if you're not, then that is Histakros.
I hear. I heard Yireh Shamayim as being the force that makes you want to build an Olam haYedidus, because you're afraid of working against the divine plan.
You think that's
right?
What over there?
I don't know, but if Yireh Shamayim means Yiras Hachet, right? Then every choice is possible. Sorry, the primary choice you have in your life is that you're going to work on not wanting what God doesn't want. I don't know. And the truth is, the reason why you see me looking in another direction is I just looked up the NSA key to log into work. So I'm going to go because I'm now beyond late enough.
Okay.
And we're going to rediscuss this paragraph because we went too quickly and it was too important. I just didn't want to stop in the middle of a thought.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank
yeah,
you.
no such thing. It's a status meeting. It's whatever.
Ouch. Okay. Bye. Good luck.
Thanks. Bye.